Hey everybody, Jim Kerr here. I can't wait to do this indispensable conversation today. This episode is going to be tremendous. My guest is none other than the Ikigai guy, Mr. David E. Marlow. After 30 years as a senior leader and executive, David's come to help people live into their purpose. He helps companies with their product launches and directions there. Also, he helps people through his coaching, his consulting, his mentoring. He was telling me before we got on today that he was he's in the midst of writing a new book, so we want to talk a little bit about that. He's the perfect guy for today's conversation. We're going to get at the question: is altruism just a sophisticated way of selfishness, form of selfishness? So anyway, I'll repeat that question again in a minute. But welcome, David. How are you today?
Oh, doing great. Really excited to have the conversation today.
Great. So let's jump right in, and I'll try to make sure I phrase the question accurately. Is altruism just a sophisticated form of selfishness? What do you think?
Yeah. So when you posed this to me, I pondered it for a bit, and the first thing that came to mind was a thing a pastor friend of mine used to say. He would talk about people that there'd be people in the church and things that were just so involved in everything, but they often didn't spend time with their families and things like that.
Mm,
And he said you don't want to be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good.
mm,
And I think there's a lot of truth in that and connection to what you were just saying. I mean, sometimes when we're doing things, it's genuinely just trying to help, but it's always worthwhile checking to see, what's our motivation? What's that driver? Is it really to serve in the example here, the church, or do I just get a big kick out of it and I'll sacrifice everything else for that? Well, that's
mm,
not really, that's not really genuinely giving, right?
mm. Yeah, I mean, studies have shown that pure altruism is rare. They're not
Mhm.
saying that it's not ever accomplished, but it's truly rare because people are motivated, as you suggest, by what they get from giving, right? So there's essentially some sort of a kickback we get when we're being selfless, right? And sort of in other words, altruistic behavior is driven by a desire to feel good about ourselves in a lot of instances. Um, so it makes me wonder, and it's kind of part of uh, what we did in leading up to this in our promo work and so on, was we asked the question: are the constructs accurate? Right? I mean, is selfishness always bad? Is altruism always good? What do you think?
Yeah, so I was just having a conversation this morning about that in terms of uh, respect for people, the concept of respect for people, and it's a very solid way to live your life, but it's a positive thing for companies. If companies, again, taking a step back to define respect for people,
Yeah.
it's a lean concept in that the only thing we really have in our lives, the only thing we really own is our time, right? I mean,
Mhm.
the time that we have, even the work that we do to earn money, I mean, that's a representation of time. And so when you're asking people in your company to attend worthless meetings or to support poorly designed products, or you're asking the customer to use poorly designed products, or to call into customer service and wait on hold forever, you're not respecting them as people. You're not respecting their time. So if you do those things, not only are you being altruistic, you're going to have a better and more successful company. It makes sense, right? And so in that case, it's okay to take that frame of being selfish. So like, we want to do what's right for us, and to do that, we've got to do what's right for the people that work for us, that depend on us as customers, and so forth.
So you'd say the construct isn't exactly
Right. Right.
straightforward as sometimes people think.
Yeah. I think I always, in all my coaching and all my consulting, I one of the first things I ask people to get used to is the phrase "it depends."
Yeah.
So often, right? It depends. There are very few explicit things that apply every time, and in that one and only way, one way. Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess I feel the same way about it. I'm not sure that the construct's right. Being selfish is not always immoral. In fact, there's moral philosophies that basically suggest people are incapable of doing anything except what's in their own self-interest, right?
Mhm.
And not all altruism is necessarily good either. I mean, if you consider something like nepotism, that's being altruistic to somebody you're related to, right?
Mhm.
um, but maybe at the expense of other people who might be, I don't know, at least in the course of business, more qualified, but yet nepotism rises to the top and someone's, you know, cousin, nephew, son, daughter gets a job that they really aren't qualified to get. So yeah, and I think you said the word, it's situational, right? It all kind of depends. But what happens if we shift our thinking more to how it applies to greater society? Does our opinions on this change? Does the constructs hold up then? When we think about being selfless or selfish in regard to something that impacts the greater good or people in the greater society. What
Mhm.
do you think?
Yeah, I think when you can apply it somewhat to even coaching, right? So you and I both do coaching and support people, and some of my own research that I was going into authenticity and things
Mm,
warns that you got to be careful that you're not guiding and directing them. I want to help. I want to help the people I'm coaching. I want to help them be
mm,
successful. But is it my definition of success? Is it my definition of helping them in a way that's going to help me? I think
mhm,
back to maybe the difference between the way I parent and the way I am a grandparent.
mm,
And when I'm a parent, I'm on the hook for that, right? That kid's got to turn out people are going to evaluate me based on that on that kid. Now, you don't
right.
consciously think that, but let's just be honest. We all feel that, right? Whereas I'll say, as a grandparent, I see my role more as being that non-judgmental, judgment-free,
Mm,
total acceptance and support. Um, so again, yes, in one way, the parent derive is good. At the same time, it is very, in many ways, very selfish and very
mm,
self-centered.
mhm.
And I look back on my parenting, and I think I was a good parent. My kids still love me and things like that. I think I'm a much better grandparent in
Yeah,
the sense of what we're talking about here today than I was a parent.
yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. I hear that quite a bit, as more and more of us are becoming grandparents. I'm not, but uh, I've got friends that have become grandparents, and yeah, they kind of sort of got to the same place. They're like, yeah, I'm a better grandfather than I was a father. I'm a better
Mm.
grandmother than I was a mother. That kind of thing. I'm not sure if we're just a little hard on ourselves, but
Oh, I'm
you
sure
know.
so. Yeah.
But I mean, back to the question about society. I mean, I feel like when you see people being selfish, sort of selfish strategies are often, labeled as deviant, cheating, free riding, egotistical, what have you. But they're undermining altruism and cooperation. And in contrast, altruistic and cooperative strategies that you see being sort of perpetrated out there are almost by definition benefiting the group,
Hmm.
often at the expense of the individual who is doing the good. So they're self-sacrificing to help the
Hmm.
betterment of society, if you will. Um, so now the construct seems like it works. Selfishness is bad and altruism's good.
Right. Right.
So so I wonder, and I just want to throw this idea out there to you. And I know you're a deep thinker, and you'll be thoughtful with your response. But is it possible that this stuff is like selfishness is neither good or bad? Altruism is neither good or bad. They're amoral, and that what really matters is intent. What do you think?
Yeah. So if you break it down in that way, yeah, what is the intention? Um, yeah, I would think perhaps that's a better frame. better way to derive the value. Even then, though, I mean, I think you mentioned nepotism, and I thought you
Mm,
were going with narcissism, but like a narcissist thinks they're doing the right thing, so their intent sort of throws a wrench in the intent thing.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's well, it's like taking care of yourself, right? So I go run. I like to run, uh, and that's for my health, and that's for my mental health as much as my physical health. My wife might suggest sometimes it's for her mental health, but I will say no to certain
I say
things.
thank God for golf,
Right,
David.
right. There you go. Yeah. Shouldn't you go for a run? Shouldn't you?
Yeah, right, right.
I just ran. Well, run some more. Uh, but I will say no to things in order to be able to run. I think
Okay,
even the opportunity to talk today, which I'm thrilled about. I think we had to kind of balance some things, right? Because it took us a while. We talked about doing this several months ago, and
yeah,
uh, that was in part saying no because there were some other things I had to say yes to, and you could frame that in the I think the positive selfish sense, right? But by doing the right things for me, I'm taking care of myself. Now I'm available for my wife. I'm available for my grandchildren. I'm
mhm,
available for my neighbors. I'm available for the people that I serve in coaching and beyond. Right. So there's times for selfishness in the sense of taking care of oneself, doing the right things for oneself,
mhm,
and that is for the broader good. When if everybody was kind of
sure.
minding their business in the positive sense, I think the world would be a better place.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, when I was preparing for the conversation today, I was thinking about these questions and my response to them, and it seems to me that only the actor can sort of make a judgment and characterization of the behavior, right?
Mhm.
Because outside looking in, you're not really sure what someone's motivation or intent is. And it would seem that you've got to become better in touch with our motivations, and I think that starts with self-awareness. Um, because then you can really say, "Am I doing this because I want people to think I'm a good parent?" To harken back to an earlier example, or am I doing this because it's the right thing to do? And it's kind of that it can only be self-determined. You've got to be able to be, close enough to your own intent to.
Right, right,
Sometimes people aren't. I mean, let's face it, half of LinkedIn has articles about people who aren't acting with intent or deliberately, right? They're just, kind of going through life. So, yeah. So here's a question for you. Let's play this a little bit. Where would you say you are on that selfless, selfish continuum? If we think of it as a continuum, it's not, there's no moral judgment, right? These things are amoral because it depends, to use your
mhm,
coaching
yeah.
tactic, right, David? Where are you on the continuum?
Oh, I would say I'm much further to the positive side of that than I was even maybe a few years ago.
Okay.
I've had the opportunity and the time to spend much more time in reflection.
Hmm.
Um, I one thing that's been a big help for me is evaluating judgment. So I was working with a friend and who's happens to be a coach, and he challenged me to think about judgment. And at the time, I said, I think if you just ask my friends, you ask people, that I'm not a very judgmental guy. I'm pretty open and accepting that kind of thing. And he said, yeah, okay, good. Just sit with it for a while. And oh man, oh, don't do that unless you're ready to open some cans, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much there was judgment in my life,
Hmm.
and that was like putting that right back on me. And again, I saw it as evaluation. I saw it as doing good, as helping people, right?
Hmm.
And so releasing a lot of that has helped me tremendously. I'd say I'm almost in my own self reflection unrecognizable in the past 3 years since I've been doing that.
Hmm.
And again, I would say most people that met me would say I was a good person, and that's
Hmm.
there's no judgment in even saying that, right? No self judgment as
Right.
much as just we're never done. and you want to keep going. And I hope that I look back 3 years from now on today and say, wow, I've really grown since then.
Right.
I
Yeah.
wasn't anywhere near where I wanted to be.
Right. Yeah. And I feel that way too. I think it's a bell curve, and I am leaning more towards the positive side of that bell curve lately. And
Mm,
maybe the last couple of years with the pandemic and all, it's made me kind of rethink priorities and things like that.
mm,
Um, but I also feel like, back to sort of the altruism definition, I'm a firm believer we only give as much as it makes us feel good to give, and kind of no more, no less. We're in that sweet spot. Maybe sometimes more, maybe sometimes a little less, but basically it's that, finding that spot that's right for you, and it's an
mm.
individual choice, and you can change it, as you're mentioning, and as you're incorporating reflection into your daily habit, you start to see that, oh yeah, I could be doing better in this, and choose to. Right? I mean, we only change what we decide we want to change. No
Right.
one can make you do something or make you change. It's got to be up to the individual. um do you think it can be taught? Do you think these things can be taught, selfishness and altruism?
Oh yeah, I think any of that can be taught. Obviously, we all have tendencies, and I think there's some levels of inborn both talent, skills, behaviors,
Mm,
personality types. But yeah, I definitely in my own life can see again significant change in even temperament and things. I would say that as a young man, I was a bit melancholy, and today people talk to me about how positive and upbeat I am.
mhm.
And you wouldn't have said that as a kid. And I think it was just the way I was wired, and over time learned uh, to see that, and then the more you do that, then the more it's reinforced, and then again, like anything, you learn through that level of reinforcement. Um, I do want to take one step back to your prior question because it hit me. When we think about that level of self reflection, I mean, I think about scripture, which is written thousands of years ago. Each one works through their own salvation, right?
Mm,
We are all called to work through our own. I don't mean the literal salvation, but that self reflection and understanding. So if that was written that many years ago, it's probably always been true, and we're all going to have to invest in that.
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a journey if you choose to take it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the rush all the time, and you're all about doing and not so much about thinking, chances are probably pretty good that you're not really, recognizing things in yourself that you want to fix, or you want to make better, or you want to improve. Right? It's sort of all, it's up to us, if we want to take the journey. Um, Interestingly, kind of back to the question about whether it can be taught, I think it can be too. And in fact, I came upon a study I thought was really interesting. It's out of the UK, and they basically said that research suggests that up to 50% of one's preferences about whether they're more selfless or selfish is genetic,
Mm-hmm.
and that they can trace back few generations and see, like, oh, there's a whole family of people here that have been really selfish, and or there's a whole, like, family history or they're really generous. And kind of interesting. So I wonder, how much of that really is genetic or just watching people behave, and that's how we learn. So if granddad was selfish, then I guess selfishness is okay. And if granddad was generous, I guess being generous is a good thing. So nature nurture, I'm not sure, but the studies suggest it gets passed down. Let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about the work setting. Um, as a longtime executive, I know you've seen it all. How do you see leaders sort of weigh the pros and cons of helping others versus helping themselves?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? So when you've got the career goals and you want to achieve, and it's that balance. I remember, so I worked at GE, in the heyday of GE, and people think that was kind of a cutthroat organization, but in reality, what we were taught, and I was got the Crotonville training, the Jack Welch, schooling, and
Hmm.
all of that. It was a balance of results and values. And the way that we were taught was that if somebody was exemplifying the values and they weren't hitting their results, we'd work with them and help them get to the results. I mean, you still had to get the results, believe me.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
you
right.
still had to get the results eventually.
There's a
But
library full of books about that within
right, right,
The GE way. So
right.
yes,
But there were plenty of people, and I worked for a few that were getting by with just the results for a while, but it eventually caught up with them, even at GE. I mean, and so it's important to have that culture. And I know
yeah,
for me personally, I'll take one step further back and go to my Marine training. So Marine Corps leadership is defined as a double braided cord with co-equal requirements. One is mission accomplishment. The other, and it's co-equal, is welfare of the troops.
yeah,
And so as a Marine leader, you were taught you've got to get the job done. But if all you think about is that, you're going to unnecessarily risk your troops, right? Your
mm,
men.
mm,
But if all you think about is their welfare, you're never going to try and take the hill, right? You're not going to.
mm,
And so it's that balance, and I've always applied that in my own leadership, and felt like that was absolutely the right way to do. I mean, if you're not getting results, you're not going to stay in business. At
right,
the same time, if you're getting results at the cost of your people or your customers or your ethics or any of those things, you eventually won't succeed either. So, I mean, again, going back to our original, it's almost selfish, right? To do the right thing because you're going to succeed and you'll fail if you don't.
right. Yeah, it's in your self interest.
Yeah, your self-interest. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say I love the Marine Corps. They were a client of mine. I always point back to my time with the Marines. They were solid folks and they were always putting sort of the mission first. And it kind of leads me to the same response I have to this question, right? The number one killer of high performing teams is the pursuit of parochial interests. And I can't tell you, David, how many times I've said that to clients as we're trying to put new change initiatives in place or new strategies, growth strategies in place, even on the coaching side of it. It's that sort of parochial interest creeps in and what's good for me. And what you see in the business setting, I think, is all sort of flavors of altruism, right? There's the reciprocal. Well, I'll do something good for you, but I expect you to
Mhm.
do something good for me, right? There's sort of that genetic or nepotism stuff that happens. Why is he the president? Well, his father's the chairman of the board. Oh, okay. And then there's sort of group altruism too. Like the manufacturing guys are all together and the marketing guys are all together, but they're not necessarily all together for the good of the company.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room in this sort of discussion to draw it and pull it forward into the business world that we all live in, and people are people, right? So if we
Mhm.
agree it's about self-interest, you don't stop having self-interest just because you're at work, right?
Right.
you know but you mentioned culture, and I'm a huge culture guy. I do a ton of work in the culture space, as I think and um, how do you weave the positive sort of selflessness stuff into a culture? How do we make work cultures more altruistic, do you think?
Yeah. I think part of it is setting up that trust level, right? So if you do the right things will happen for you. I had an opportunity to work at a company after I left GE that it was just an awful situation. They didn't reward people for good work. I was trying to change the culture there, and I remember the night shift manager at the network operations center came to me. He goes, "Look, Dave, I'm on board with what you're trying to do. But if I work my ass off, I'm going to get a 5% raise. If I don't do anything, I'm going to get a 5% raise."
Right.
And I said, "Well, listen to me. I will promise you that there'll be a difference for you if you do the work. If I have to write you a check myself, I will do it."
Hmm.
And he looked at me kind of skeptically, but I kept working to build levels of trust, other ways of trust.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so, sure enough, first year he did a bang up job, and I had worked with my leadership and the accountants and everybody, so that I had more flexibility in terms of raises. And he got more than a 5% raise.
Mm.
That's back when 5% raises were like average. I guess people might like those right now, but
Yeah. Yeah. True.
um, but at any rate, that was the thing. And because the culture there, truly, I tried to teach just some business understanding, in this org group. And I said, well, let's just talk about, why do you get a raise? And they
Yeah.
said, because it's April. Because
Yeah.
April, we get our raises in April. I'm like,
Right.
no, no. Why does how can a business provide you with a,
Right.
because it's April?
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So,
Right. They're
so
not
yeah,
connecting the results to the
yeah. So it took a
to the
while, but I
benefit.
think in answer to your question, it's building that level of trust that if they do the right things will happen for them as well. Um, and then constantly reinforcing that. I mean, you've got to,
Yeah.
as soon as you break that, you lose it, right?
Yeah. Again, it starts with us as leaders, right? We've got to be a role model, and I think trust is certainly a key element of that. If we don't have trust, we don't really have leadership, because people aren't following people they don't trust. You know, they might do what the order is; they have
Right.
to take the order, but they're not necessarily truly committed to the cause. But I also think it's about practicing gratitude, right? It's about demonstrating empathy, exhibiting acceptance, right? And it's the same things you do to your family, right?
Hmm.
You're going to be more accepting of things, and you're going to try to maybe correct bad behavior, but it's still about that, and supporting causes, by providing opportunities for people to give back. I think if top leaders do those things, they're a role model, they're showing gratitude, they're being empathetic, they're being accepting of others, then I think you start to see altruism get folded into the organization. And because, my simple definition of culture always is, if you want to understand culture, watch how people behave.
Hmm.
And you through your own experience, you walk into a business and there's a buzz and there's energy and there's people talking, and you get one feeling about the culture. You walk into another place, it's quiet. you know
Right.
there's stage brush blowing down between the cubes. You kind of realize, okay, this is a different place. Let's go here. We've only got a minute or two, but I'd love to hear your reaction to this, and maybe it's our last question, but what are some of the benefits of building that altruism into a company culture? What do you think about the companies that can pull it off? What do they get for
Yeah.
the effort?
Well, almost ties to that last point you were making. When you get that established, and when people understand that, when they have that level of trust, and they see that you value empathy and all of the other positive values you just shared, then it becomes self-perpetuating, right? Because you don't want it to disappear. We used to I'll go back to the Marine Corps, because it's very solid culture that has
Yeah.
maintained a pretty steady pace. We would say, not my Marine Corps. When there was a action or a behavior, it's not my Marine Corps.
Hmm.
And because we had an image of what we were, what our culture was,
Hmm.
and we wanted that to last. And
Sure.
when you can get that in a company, then it becomes self-perpetuating. Then people start to, no, we don't do that.
Right.
Um, that one company I shared with you, where I led the, the entire technology sector. I thought one of the nicest compliments I've ever gotten from a leader. That said, "Yeah, I was talking with a guy, and he said, this other vice president, he said, yeah, I can spot one of Marlow's guys right away." And I said, "Why is that? What did he say?" He said, "They're on time, they're ready, they're focused, they're committed, and they're
Right.
going to do the job."
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, that's what
Yeah.
exactly what I wanted.
That is a huge compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, again, the things that you'd look for and why you should invest in this, right? And invest in your culture is, staff well being, huge issue right now with
Mhm.
all of what we've been living through. Um, inspiring people to be part of something bigger than themselves, right? that whole notion of not my Marine Corps is about people sort of self-regulating, right? They're keeping
Hmm.
each other honest because they're saying, look, this is what we do, this is who we are, and what you just did is unacceptable, you know.
Hmm.
And obviously productivity, and at the end of it all, it's the bottom line. So you'd invest your ROI in building an altruistic culture comes at the bottom line, because I've got people that are healthy, that are inspired, productive, and they're delivering, right?
Hmm.
So hey, look, David, thanks so much for joining me today. We can continue the conversation on LinkedIn Live, so be sure to check that out and respond. I know we've got a bunch of comments out there, and I really look forward to our next conversation. This was really good. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
I'll see you next time.